Hello YouTube, Josh here with the channel zzzgiantawake, and today I'm here to talk about the Nevada convention and the stories that have followed since it. I apologize for having my computer on screen, but I'm going to need to reference it and may move it on or off screen. So let's talk about the Nevada convention and kind of give some introduction to the story and what happened leading up to the Nevada convention. To start with, there was a vote, obviously. It was the second or third state to vote. I think it was actually the second after New Hampshire. And Hillary Clinton won. She won the popular vote by 53 to 47%, if I remember right. Right in that ballpark, and she should have won a majority of the delegates. Now, our election system in the United States of America is a fucking nightmare and a headache, and it's hard to follow. But Nevada has a three-stage process. So they have the initial vote, in which some of the delegates become pledged, and some of them remain unbound until they have the rest of the convention. At which point, then the state delegates decide who becomes the bound national delegates. So in the step two, part two of the process, because Bernie Sanders had more supporters show up, he ended up flipping the count, and he was going to get one more delegate than Hillary would have from the bound delegate portion of it, not from the superdelegate portion of it. As opposed to, I think she was going to win two more if they'd just gone with the popular vote. Something to that effect. Again, this part is not what I feel is the pertinent part of the story. Step one, she wins the popular vote in a closed primary. Step two is that he ends up flipping it, and not because of anything that he did, but because of how well his state organizers stayed in contact with his people and how poorly Hillary Clinton's delegates showed up. So he flipped it because of that, not because of any dirty tricks, not because of anything else. So then step three is the state convention, and it was at a hotel in Las Vegas. And here's where things got iffy. So from what I can gather from a number of different sources, what ended up happening is more Hillary supporters show up, even though, and there were like 53 Bernie delegates who were not allowed to have a say in it, had all of them showed up. Not all of them showed up. So regardless of whether they were allowed to vote or not, it doesn't seem like they would have flipped it. It seemed like Hillary Clinton had more people legitimately show up. And so that's one thing. So even had everything gone according to plans, and even had there not been any people not allowed to vote because of that, Hillary still would have won. So the delegate is also not the pertinent part of the story in this, from my perspective. So moving forward, what happened is, to open the session, there was a voice vote, and it seemed from everything that I could find pretty clear-cut. Hillary Clinton supporters were retaining the rules from the previous convention, and Bernie Clinton Sanders for changing the rules from the prior convention. And again, the main rule that was being questioned at the convention is whether the people who weren't registered correctly would be allowed to become part of the convention. And if that would have been better for Bernie's supporters, but I don't think that would have made the difference. Now that was towards the beginning of the convention. I want to emphasize that that is not what caused the anger at the end of the convention. The convention started approximately 10 in the morning. And at about 10 o'clock at night is when the convention convened. The convention, when it convened, there was going to be a vote on a recount, supposedly from eyewitness stories that I've been able to find. And I will link every source that I can in the description, and I'll try and title them. I've got like 10 sources. But supposedly, there was going to be a recount at the end of the section, just to make sure that there were as many Hillary Clinton supporters as Bernie Sanders supporters, because at some point during the convention there was a question of whether or not all of the people were counted correctly at the beginning of the convention. But I'm going to show you a video clip, and if you're seeing what I'm seeing, and if that camera's in the same room as the place, there was absolutely no chance that there was a concession on the voice vote. So here it is.
As submitted by the county chairs, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The business of the convention. This convention is concluded. We have finished all of it. We are adjourned. What the fuck was this? What the fuck was that?
So the other thing that I want you to notice, and if you have to go back to watch it again, is that she's holding a piece of paper that she's reading from. There was no chance that that convention was not going to end at that voice vote. She had it scripted out exactly what she was going to do. She utilized the power of the chair to convene it, even though there was still stuff that was supposed to be taken into consideration. Of course, this screws over Bernie Sanders supporters, or at least they feel more wrong than Hillary Clinton supporters, because they feel like the DNC is against them and working actively against them. Now, here's where the whole thing kind of goes to shit. And it's not just with the Bernie Sanders supporters, it's a lot of things. So I want to state that, first off, she's wrong for convening it the way she did. Like, if it had to go on until 2 o'clock or until the next day, if they had to convene it for the night and re-meet the following day, they should have done what they needed to do to get it wrapped up ethically and clearly and without using or essentially abusing what it seemed like to be her chair power. So when she does that, Bernie supporters, understandably upset, rush towards the stage and are cursing and are giving security a hard time and are lingering and are trying to refuse to leave and try to force it to reopen. And what they shouldn't have sworn, like, whatever. I'm not a big fan of cursing at people because, again, what it does is allows the news coverage to spin it the way they did. Eventually, after no arrests were made, after nothing of incident, nothing worthwhile happening, everybody left and everybody went home. Unfortunately, some people called, and let me grab her name. So it's Miss Lange. I think that's how you pronounce her name. If I'm saying it wrong, I'm not gonna learn it at this point. So unfortunately, Miss Lange received calls where she received death threats, and somebody decided that it would be wise to publish her number online. I do not in any way condone or agree with death threats or doxing people. That's beyond what's reasonable. And I criticized Donald Trump when he did it against Senator Lindsey Graham, because that's just not something that you do. And I didn't criticize it on this channel. I just criticized it in a video that I helped Matt make, and I did it indirectly. But the point is that it's never okay to dox somebody. It's never all right to send death threats. It's not okay ever, end of story, period. Those things shouldn't happen. But so now, with that being said, and I hope that I have been very clear on that, she released some of the phone calls in which she did actually receive death threats. But that's the end of it. Like, there's no way to tell that those are Bernie Sanders supporters. There's no way to tell how many she received, and there's no way that can be tied directly to Bernie Sanders, or that he can be held responsible for that. So the news cycle of the following couple of days have been all about how Bernie Sanders has been irresponsible and how Bernie Sanders needs to tell his people to calm down, and that Bernie Sanders this and this and that. Now, what I want to say is that this is what is known as a hatchet job. The news cycle is sick of Bernie Sanders being out there and saying what's on his mind. Now, this is going to annoy some of the Bernie supporters that I know, but Clinton has a very good chance of locking this up. And essentially, I think she's all but won it. And that's my personal opinion. I'm not just going off of stats. I've done the math, and I've been doing the math for a long time, and actually it became extremely difficult, a narrow avenue once he lost Florida in the amount that he did. and I have not been convinced that he's really had a chance since then to win. But I feel like his message is important and that he should carry on until the Democratic Convention. The news cycles do not want that to happen, and that's why they covered it the way they did. They said there was violence at the Nevada rally, that there were chairs thrown, and that she received death threats, and that if Bernie Sanders doesn't wrap this up, it's because he's being irresponsible. And that is bullshit. Front to back. That is absolute horseshit. Bernie Sanders is not at all responsible for what people do, independent of him, at the National Convention when they feel that their voice has been undermined and that they're not being considered to listen to it. Even with that being said, there was no violence that anybody has documented. There were no chairs thrown. There was none of that. And I've even got Anderson Cooper talking about it after the fact, after they had run a number of news stories saying they had reports of chairs being thrown and people making threats at the convention, which did not happen. It was after the convention on the phone, and it was from fucking who knows what, some fucking loser who is in the basement somewhere, and they should investigate that shit. And just as if it had happened to Barack Obama now, anybody making death threats should be investigated, and they should allocate the resources to find them. And it pisses me off that anybody who would call themselves a Bernie Sanders supporter would make that type of threat. Now, if it wasn't a Bernie Sanders supporter and it was something else, they should still look into it and find out what the fuck is going on. Alright, bringing it in a little bit. So here's I'm just going to put audio over here. Here is Anderson Cooper on CNN admitting that there was no violence. Here it is.
Point out the word violence was used at that Nevada event. Really wasn't actual violence. There was certainly disruption. There was a lot of anger and emotion, and certainly death threats, which were completely inappropriate. But just for accuracy's sake, no arrests or anything like that were actually made. Back now with their panel.
CNN reported that wasn't the case. Like, if there had been any way that they could have propped up the stories that they'd been running prior to this, they would have propped them up with some evidence. So there was no chair throwing. Absolutely not. Now, here's my bigger concern. Here's what I want to carry over, is that now there are people on social media saying, hey, Bernie Sanders supporters are irresponsible and violent, and that Bernie Sanders needs to drop from the race, and that Bernie Sanders is the problem, and that's not the case. It's the DNC has been doing all these things. The media has been doing lots of little twists. Now, I promise you, whoever wins the Bernie Sanders supporters out of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump is going to win the presidency. And this is the most important voting bloc. And it's weird that it's going to be the people who drop from the most left-leaning person in the race who makes that decision. But if you see the difference in numbers between Bernie Sanders against Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump, it's a huge difference. Typically it's somewhere between 4 and 10% difference between when Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump. That means that Donald Trump is getting some supporters from Bernie Sanders if Bernie Sanders voters if and when he drops. Now, if Hillary Clinton were to do the right thing and the media were to do the right thing and say, hey, we shouldn't be slandering all Bernie Sanders supporters, we should not be talking shit on Bernie Sanders, and if they were to say take the high road, you're going to win a lot more Bernie Sanders supporters, and you really don't have anything to gain by trashing Bernie Sanders at this point and saying that he's being dishonest or disrespectful. Fuck. I have to redo a lot of this. So back up, CNN reporter, blah blah blah. So there's a story in the media, and this is Washington Post, and this is the main reason that prompted me to make this video. Tensions in the Democratic presidential race exploded in Nevada over the weekend. Supporters of Senator Bernie Sanders shouted, cursed, and threw chairs. Not true. During a state convention which they had failed to force rule changes that they wanted. Even though they were attempting to get more delegates than the caucus results in the state suggested they deserved, they attack the process as unfair. The state party chair subsequently received death threats against her and her family. Mr. Sanders responded with self-righteousness and hypocrisy. He released a statement in which he listed a series of procedural complaints about the Nevada convention attacked by the Democratic Party for not being inclusive enough, and warned that millions of Americans are outraged and that the political world is changing. He offered a throwaway line 3 paragraphs down, condemning his supporters' hooliganism in a statement that mostly justified it. Now, when Bernie Sanders is stating, and I've stated this on the Recklessly Skeptical podcast, that, hey, people are going to be pissed off if you undermine democracy, and there were a lot of procedural rules. When you alienate Bernie Sanders supporters, you may be alienating the most important bloc. And again, this isn't like Bernie Sanders doesn't run it. Many of us, I would say a majority of us, have only been supporting Bernie Sanders since October, September timeframe, when we realized that he had the integrity of the leader that a lot of us were hoping to find. He also condemned it. The article here states that he condemned it. The violence, all of that. He has never supported it. He has never supported any sort of death threats. And he wasn't justifying the death threats. But the people being upset in Nevada where there was no violence is obviously understandable. And again, I want to emphasize that Bernie Sanders is not stating, he doesn't have mind control powers where he controls his supporters. What he's stating is he knows why they're upset, and so he's giving the Democratic National Party the ability to adjust their behavior in such a way that might include Bernie Sanders supporters, a group of people that Bernie Sanders obviously resonates with. To continue with the article, Mr. Sanders' irresponsibility is sadly unsurprising. He has stirred up a populist energy over the past several months with anti-corporate scapegoating and extravagant claims about policy. He has indulged and encouraged hyperbolic feelings that the country is badly adrift, that most of the nation agrees with a left-wing agenda, but is trapped in a corrupt system, and that nothing but a political revolution will do. He has attracted some big, passionate crowds, but he has lagged in votes. He increasingly has questioned the legitimacy of the process and encouraged his supporters to feel disenfranchised. The result is a toxic mix of unreasoned revolutionary fervor and perceived grievances. Yeah, we're kind of fucking pissed off. We don't like not having a say in our own democracy. Money needs to be taken out of politics. The billionaires do not need the tax breaks. The biggest corporations do not need the tax breaks. Yeah, that's resonated with us for a long time. If you look at the Occupy movement, that was in essentially every major city in the United States, you would understand that. And this is the Washington Post, so it doesn't surprise me that they really don't get it. Like, this writer has no fucking clue that we exist whether Bernie Sanders is speaking for us or not. What is particularly galling about the Sanders camp's complaints about disenfranchisement is that Mr. Sanders has benefited or tried to benefit from a variety of sketchy quirks of the nominating process. He has claimed support for his case in caucuses, which are quite exclusive, but he complains about closed primary elections, which are more inclusive. Now, how the fuck is an open caucus that has less stepping stools or barriers in the way of it more inclusive than a closed primary which excludes all independents, and you have to be registered as a Democrat by a certain deadline, or else you can't vote? Like, by definition, that's just not the fucking case. And also, the variety of sketchy quirks of the nominating process are the sketchy quirks put there by the DNC in years past, as well as the quirks that he's taking advantage of is having people show up. How is that a sketchy quirk? He just had more people show up at the second thing. It's not like he pulled some fucking trick to trick Clinton supporters into not showing up. Just more Bernie Sanders supporters showed up in the second phase of the process. In Nevada, his supporters are trying to game the rules, again, by having more people show up, to get more delegates and got upset when they did not succeed. No, they got upset when the convention closed without the recount that it seemed had been agreed to. As veteran Nevada politics reporter John Ralston put it, despite their social media frothing in self-righteous screeds, the facts reveal that the Sanders folks disregard rules, then when shown the truth, attack organizers and party officials as tools of a conspiracy to defraud the senator of what was never rightfully his in the first place. Now, here's what I want to take away as the main point. There was a little bit more to the article, but I'm just saying Sanders has no chance. When you use language like that, and somebody on Facebook stated that it's not the DNC's job or the party chair's job to educate people of what the convention rules are. When you take that position that Bernie Sanders supporters are essentially sniveling little bitches who have no reason to vote or no reason to feel the way that they do, when they feel like they're fucking hosed over, when they work 7.25 an hour jobs, when we feel completely excluded by the political system, and that Bernie Sanders has been the only person to give an honest voice to middle-class working people, that's when you're going to lose people to Donald Trump. I really do not want Donald Trump to win this election, but with Hillary and Hillary supporters and the media who have an obvious bias towards Hillary Clinton, when they take that type of language with the middle-class people who are supporting Bernie Sanders, and there's a Bernie or bust movement going on, that's when you're going to lose the election. When they go to Donald Trump because they think that Donald Trump cares more about them than Hillary Clinton people do. And also when they decide that, hey, fuck the system, I'm not going to show up, or fuck the two-party system, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein. That's when you're going to have an issue, and that's when the Democratic Party loses what should be the biggest landslide election of history. So that's all I've got to say for now. If you have questions, I'll try and address them in the comment section below, so please leave them there. Like this video if you like it, share it if you thought that there was something useful in there. I had to cut a lot out, and hopefully it's not too long. I think that's it. So please, Hillary Clinton supporters, or supporters of blue no matter who, stop using such stupid fucking rhetoric. Also, one post note, just again about my friend who on Facebook stated that it's not the party's job to educate people of what the rules are. If you want people to feel included in your party, and you want people to feel like, hey, that's the person who I'm going to support, and that is your job. If I were to run for office myself, I would take part of my job description, the understanding of part of my job description is educating why to people they should vote for me, why I care about them, and why and how to vote for me and how to support me. That is literally the primary part of my job. The secondary part of my job is to get the policy through that matters. But the primary part of my job, if I were running for office, how I would see it, is as an educator. So I don't know how you don't think that it is up to the DNC to educate people on why they should still fucking stay with that party after they feel betrayed. Or misrepresented, or anything like that. So, until next time, take care.